Hello.
Hey, Evan, how you doing tonight? We appreciate the people of RPG tapping in here for a special new platform breakdown. We're here with Evan Goldenberg of UltraGM. Fantastic platform. Mike and I have been toying around with it for a little bit. Evan, you want to let the people know what gave you the inspiration for this platform?
Sure. So, I mean, the concept behind Ultra GM is to sort of bring what I think is the fantasy for fantasy football, and that is to be the GM of your favorite team. So, we try to put the user into that role. You choose the team that you want, presumably the one you've loved your whole life and have followed your whole life. It's as if they shit canned the GM in February and they hired you and said you're going to take over the roster and right the ship. And so you come in and you get that team's roster as of the start of the league year, the start of free agency, and then you build it from there. So you build it through the college draft, you build it through a free agency, trades, even practice squad maneuvers, and build that team in your image. You know, we all sit there during the draft and we have the guys we want the team to take. And of course they rarely take the guy you want them to take. Now is the chance to take the guy that you want to take. And then it plays out during the season, fantasy football style, but it's a full 53-man roster, scoring for all positions. The scoring is scaled to sort of the relative value of the positions as indicated sort of by the NFL. And then you play simultaneously in two different leagues. So all that means is that your score each week is compared to the scores of two different teams, each of which are in different leagues. One of them is a 32-team league that mirrors the NFL, same teams, same schedule, everything about it is just like the NFL. And that's where all of your transactions take place. That's where the draft happens. That's where free agency happens, et cetera. The other league is a team-specific league. It's a 14-team league. And in that league, there's a CPU-managed team that's essentially the real team for the real GM of that team. And then there's 12 other guys like you that are also, hardcore fans of that team that are building their version of that team in their image. And you're competing with them also to see which of you can do that job the best and create the best team. And it's dynasty style. So, this, just as a real GM should be thinking a couple years out, building over time, that's the same idea here with Ultra GM.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool. Really appreciate the introduction to that. The 32 team versus the 14 team, I think that's super interesting. Being able to have that cross-platform almost, seeing how others that are those diehards may be trying to change up your favorite team. So being from Pennsylvania, specifically the eastern side of Pennsylvania, I am a diehard Eagles fan. Philadelphia for every sport, honestly. Have been playing Dynasty fantasy football since 2010. Yeah, 2010. So been in that for a long time now. So really interesting. I've always wondered how people make it work with these offensive linemen, with defensive linemen. Obviously, you start getting into the IVP leagues and you can start trying to figure out, okay, this is generically how corners versus linebackers versus D tackles versus those premium edge rushers. So I was looking through the scoring and the Excel spreadsheet that y'all provide to be able to look at previous scoring and everything, trying to find some corollaries between positions. And I thought it was super interesting being able to go through it, being able to look at those edge guys specifically. Those are your premium positions in the NFL draft on your NFL teams. Those are the guys you're shelling out the big money for. So being able to see them and how they compare to running backs or wide receivers, which are fantasy football havens for people, they understand those positions. And then being able to look at tackles, guards, and centers. So I thought that was very interesting. We were kind of talking before the show. Can you kind of go into a little bit on the explanation of blocking, how you kind of came up with the idea of adding those and the weighted metrics of it?
Sure. So, what, as I said, what, I wanted to do with the concept was create something that would be like a real GM experience. And obviously the offensive line is a huge, huge part of football. I mean, it hasn't traditionally been a part of fantasy football, but it's a huge part of what wins and loses during the season. I think that was certainly the case for the Eagles this year and almost every year. So, to me, we had to have offensive linemen in there. Obviously, there was a challenge of how do you score offensive linemen? And, there are some decent metrics out there for pass blocking. There's a very, very little out there that includes the run blocking. So what I landed on was a metric from Sports Info Solutions, SIS, and they have this total points metric. And what they do for total points is they essentially take the EPA, the expected points added for each play. They break down the film and divvy up credit and blame for the points on that particular play, and that includes for offensive linemen. So we're using their blocking points metric as the basis for the scoring for offensive linemen. And so what can happen there is, if a running back gets a 60-yard touchdown run, let's say, and it happens because there was just a gaping hole between the right guard and the right tackle, and any running back in the world could have run through there and gotten the huge gain, the lion's share of the points gained for that play is probably going to go to to the right guard and the right tackle, the guys that created the hole, rather than the guy who happened to have been lucky enough to get that hole and the chance to run through it. So what we see is, the SIS blocking points matches up pretty well with expectations. Of course, there are always some players that do a little better than you might expect. There's some players that end up doing a little worse than you might expect. But overall, the players that are reputed and considered to be the top blockers in the league, the top offensive linemen, tend to be towards the top of the points scoring metric as well.
Okay, awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for explaining that. Now, the thing that everybody wants to start thinking about is, man, how can I make some trades? How can I get one over on my league mates? How can I get that Howie Roseman steal where he just somehow magically turns a 4th round pick into a second next year? You're just
Right.
and the man's a magician. Trades, is this kind of a free-for-all situation? Like, hey, it's player-to-player type of trades. You're just making it based off of future draft capital, existing players on your team, or are there any kind of league safes setting that are set up for it?
So you can trade players and you can trade draft picks. Draft picks only current year draft picks, though. So
Okay.
you can't trade future year draft picks, but you can trade, players or picks or a combination thereof. But this whole system includes the real NFL salary cap and real NFL contracts. So you can do the trades, but you might have a dead cap hit associated with a trade or releasing a player or whatever moves you do. Now, we have a transaction calculator that you can run whatever transactions you're thinking of doing, you run through the calculator, and it will tell you, hey, this is going to cost you another 22 million under the cap, or this is going to save you 6 million under the cap. So you don't have to sit there and have a calculator or spreadsheet or anything like that. It will do the math and make that stuff relatively easy. But you do have to be cognizant of that stuff because, part of the premise here is, I think, so many fans think and have thought for years that they could do the job better than the guy who's doing it for their team. You mentioned being an Eagles fan. I mean, I talked to Eagles fans, and as happy as you guys should be, a lot of them, they still have their complaints about Roseman somehow. So I think a lot of us have that idea. And if you want to be able to say and really be able to compete, so to speak, with the real GM of your team, you've got to have the same constraints and restraints that they have, which is mostly the salary cap. So you got to play by those same rules, and keep your team within a budget. Can't go over the cap, etc. So for trades, you will have salary cap ramifications, both for players leaving potentially with dead money, and for players coming in. Trades are subject to commissioner approval, but the standard is basically a kind of a non-collusion standard. So we're not going to put our thumb heavily on the scale for that. It's really going to be, if there's a reasonable reason for the trade being done on both sides, the trade will be approved. And in terms of getting one over, I think we're going to have a pretty sophisticated group of players. I think this is going to appeal to pretty sophisticated people. So, as you're running your Eagles team, you may want to try to pull one over on the guy running the Commanders team, the Washington team, but that guy is going to be a pretty sophisticated fan. So, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be like taking candy from a baby with these deals. Everyone's going to be, I think, looking out for the health and value of their team. And so, I think people will probably end up finding that, those great trades are really tough to get. It's tough to do when you need an actual person on the other side that knows what they're doing, to take the deal.
Yeah, totally understand that. Totally agree. Hopefully we're getting some high class minds in here to be able to run these teams. Obviously, it takes a lot of brain power to start trying to pull together all of the different parts of an NFL team. Moving on here to league prizes, buy-ins. So it's my understanding that this is a certain nominal yearly fee for a specific team. And then if the commissioner wants to set up something on a additional buy-in for a quote unquote prize pool, that is up to the commissioner to be able to do.
That's right. So right now, the regular price for all teams is $30 for the season. If you use a promo code like the RPG 25 promo code, it will be $5 off. So it will be 25. And that's basically for the right and ability to play. There's no prizes inherently associated with that. If we were to get involved in managing prizes, we'd be subject to 50 different states' gaming laws, and we're not ready for that. I don't know if we ever will be, but we're definitely not ready for that now. So for now, it's a play for fun. However, just like if you join a league in ESPN or Yahoo or some other, free fantasy football platform, very often the people in the league get together and they decide they want to put a little bit of money on it, and they manage the pool. They decide what it should be. Somebody controls the money other than me. And then, you play it out from there. So that's totally allowed, totally encouraged, just like it would be in those other types of platforms, but we are not managing prize money. So
understood. Fantastic. I know a lot of different fantasy football leagues use other prize pools just to be able to keep the money a little bit safer off to the side. You don't get people trying to pull anything over. One thing that I know, having run some dynasty leagues for 10 plus years at this point, trying to find somebody to take over a team that's just, oh man, they're left in a bad spot. What kind of options do we have on this platform? Is there a sophisticated CPU model that could potentially take over some of those teams if we can't find a buddy to be able to fill it?
So let me just start with the full league fill concept, because that will start kind of illustrating. So you can have in either the 32 team league or the 14 team league, you can have a public league or a private league. If it's a public league, then you'll go into the next available league with a spot for the team that you're representing, and if we are the commissioner, so to speak, of that league. And if someone were to not renew for the following season, then the next person, let's say someone doesn't renew the Colts team, the next person that signs up as a Colts team would go preferentially into that league and would just take over that team. Now they would start anew. They would start with the new fresh version of the Colts team next year, as opposed to the one that was starting to build for this year. And if nobody were to take the Colts team, then it would just be a CPU managed team that really doesn't have any impact on day-to-day gameplay or week-to-week gameplay. So when you're facing a CPU team, it's just whoever that real NFL team has on the field that day is who gets scored. And, there's no impact on the scoring. We do want to have as many user-owned teams as possible, mainly because you can only trade with user-owned teams. You can't trade with CPU teams. So to have the most robust trade market, which is what we want to have, we want to preferentially, plug humans into any sort of abandoned teams for that matter. And then if it's a private league, then the league can decide themselves, and the commissioner can decide. They can either try to find someone among the friend group to take over that particular Colts team in this example, or they can do the same thing, and that can either be a CPU team, or we can, plug someone else into that slot for that team if that's what they want to do.
Okay. And just making sure that I'm understanding this correctly. You had mentioned that if somebody were to drop and say the new owner comes in, they're starting with a fresh Colts team in this example for, say, 2026 season.
Right.
So if the existing owner, before they dropped, traded away, say, Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren as an example,
right,
then theoretically, could you have a dual copy in a league of a player?
You could have two versions of a player in a league, but you can't have two versions of a player on a single team.
Okay.
So the duplicates of players can happen kind of around the edges. Really, it's not that big of a deal if you think about it. In the 14-team league that we're talking about, almost all the teams are going to have a certain duplicates. Probably everyone in the Eagles 14-team league is going to have Jalen Hurts. Everyone's going to have, Jalen Carter. So, for your gameplay, it really doesn't matter. And if you were playing in a given week against a team that had the same guy you had, then their scores are just going to basically cancel each other out, and the game's going to get decided by everybody else. So I don't think it really has any kind of negative impact, and we don't allow you to have anyone to sort of trade for a roster of, 3 Saquon Barkleys. In case if there were multiple Saquon Barkleys, you can only have one per team. So that would be another basis for rejecting a trade is if it were to result in a duplicate version of a player.
Okay, fantastic. We're just plugging up these holes as we're starting to think about them.
Yep.
Scheduling and bye weeks. So if you're competing in the 32-team league, obviously if you have the Eagles, you're going to have a lot of guys on a bye week at the same time.
Right.
So how did you kind of think through and manage that side of it?
You're going to be on bye that week too.
Okay.
So when the real Eagles are on bye, you're on bye. And so what that means is that, you will have some players on your roster that are actually on different NFL teams. And, you probably are going to hope that they don't just kill it that week, because you're not going to get any credit for that. So each team follows the same schedule as the real NFL team. When the Eagles play the Cowboys, you're playing your counterpart who's a Cowboys guy. And when the Eagles are on bye, you're on bye as well. So now, obviously, you do want to keep track of, and the platform, makes that pretty easy to keep track of the players that are on your your Philadelphia-based team that are not actual Eagles players. You'll want to make sure that, that they're not on bye during the weeks that you're not on bye. And if they are on bye, you'll want to make them inactive for that week.
Gotcha. Okay. Fantastic. And then let's go into draft settings or things of that nature. So I know in most fantasy football leagues, obviously you have an option to draft from just a blank slate as a startup.
Right.
It's understood here that is not the case. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay.
So
All
here,
right.
the draft that we talk about is a college draft. So it's basically, for this year, it's going to be a replay of the 2025 draft. You're going to start off drafting in the same spot that your team, your real NFL team, drafted in. But I say you start off there because you can trade up and down. So you can trade players and picks to move up in the draft for a particular player you love. You can trade back to try to accumulate picks. You can kind of work the board. I feel like, for a lot of us, some of the fun and intrigue of the draft is really about that ability to move up and down the board that probably no team does as much as we'd really like them to. But this is a chance to try to go ahead and do that. So it basically plays out just like the real NFL draft, 7 rounds, start off in all those same picks. And instead of, yelling at the TV screen that you want the team to pick whoever it was that you wanted and they took someone different, here's your chance to pick the guys that you thought they should have picked in the first place, and then, run with it with that team, see how you do.
Okay, awesome. And then thinking from a contract standpoint here, how do the contracts get updated? Is that an in-game metric, or is it 100% reflective off of the NFL? So say I had somebody that has a contract expiring at the end of this season, and they go in the NFL and sign with a different team, make a lot more money than they currently were. Is my fantasy team now going to be subject to the new contract that they signed?
So you're not going to have that player, because when that player's contract ends, he's going to become an UltraGM free agent, just like he became an NFL free agent. So a guy becomes actually an UltraGM free agent, not when his old contract expires, but when his old contract expires and he then signs that new deal that you talked about. Mm-hmm. And when he signs that new deal, the player and the contract together are basically a package deal, and you can bid on that. So there will be players, as there always are, that, you love the player, and then you see the deal that the guy signed and you're like, whoa. Like, I like the player, but I don't want to spend $37 million a year on that guy. And then there'll be other players who, you might be like not in love with, but are like, yeah, that's a good player. And for some reason he signed a $2.2 million contract. And I think he's going to be a legit number 2 receiver and is going to be a huge value at that number. So that might be a contract that you look at in free agency as an incredible value deal that you want to go after, much more so than maybe the $37 million guy who may be a much better player, but you've got to keep track of that value proposition because you've got a salary cap of your own.
Sure. And the starting deals, for reference here, the starting deals are whatever they currently have in the NFL. So say they had a Patrick Mahomes, giant deal that he had before many, many years, but now it's currently adjusted in UltraGM for wherever he currently is at and how much is left of that deal. Accurate?
Right. So, okay. Yeah. So Mahomes, you start, as I had mentioned in the beginning, you start with the team and the contracts as of the start of the league year, March 12th. And the players who renegotiate their deals, like in this case, Mahomes, they did a little bit of restructuring for Mahomes since then. And so what will happen is if you have Mahomes on your roster, you'll get a notification and an option to either accept the new deal and replace his old deal with the new deal, or you can decline that and keep him under the old deal. Now, usually when they do those adjustments, they're often adding years. So if you decline the new deal, he's probably going to become a free agent a little bit sooner under the old deal. And when he becomes a free agent, you may lose him. But you do have the control to decide, I want to keep him, I like this new deal and I want the new deal, or to keep him under the old deal.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think we've gone over a lot of topics with UltraGM during this episode here. Evan, is there anything else that you really think that the fans and that people just need to know about the platform?
I mean, there's really a lot of stuff. It's a very realistic platform, down to the point of even a practice squad. So just like in the real NFL, you've got you've got the ability to poach players off other teams' practice squads. They can poach players off your practice squad. So that's a feature we didn't talk about. And then just to touch on sort of the scaled scoring concept. So what we did is we for the scoring of each position, we scaled it to the relative value of the position as indicated by the NFL. And we used compensation, what does the NFL pay for the various positions, and draft resources. How much are these positions that teams use premium picks on as, top 10 picks on, or are these positions that teams usually wait till the second or third round to start filling them? And so what we get from that is as expected. I mean, quarterback is the most important position on the field. Quarterbacks, score on average more than twice as much as any other position. But the next batch, and you alluded to this earlier, are those premium positions like edge rusher, left tackles, your shutdown corners. That's kind of the next batch. Those positions are, in this format are more valuable on average than your running backs, which, in your most typical fantasy football platforms are kind of the most valuable positions. Here, running backs somewhat devalued. Now, if you get a guy like Saquon Barkley's 2024 season, he's going to kill it and you're going to get great points for him. But, on average, running backs score less than positions like left tackle, edge rusher, et cetera, because the NFL, frankly, just views running backs as more fungible and less valuable than some of those other positions.
Yeah, totally understand that. There are elite running back seasons, and frankly, they don't happen nearly as often as I would love to see. Yeah. Being an Eagles fan, we love to run the ball down defenses' throats and then just be able to wear them down.
Right.
All right. But Evan, we greatly appreciate you being on the show here. We will make sure, Mike specifically, and then also the RPG account, we'll make sure to put out some tweets, try and, get people to get into this episode so that hopefully they're joining the UltraGM platform, because look, it seems like a fantastic platform. It seems like there is a little bit of a learning curve right off the beginning. It can be a little overwhelming with the amount of data and amount of information in front of you. But man, when you can say I did a better job than one of my buddies, it just, nothing feels better than that. All right. Just being able to take down those guys that you've known for 15 years.
One of the things about that learning curve, I mean, obviously, I think that the cost to play, $25 or $30 a year, depending on, if you use a promo code or not, is I think less than you can get a team t-shirt for these days. So in the scheme of things, it's not that much. I hope that people don't feel too daunted. There is a lot going on with this, but it also, hey, this is just fun and it's a game. And, I think, I'd like for people to sort of embrace that learning curve. I think it's going to be the kind of thing, when I remember when I was trying to teach my son football, and it's a tough game to explain to a kid. Like, it's really just complicated. And it wasn't really until he started playing Madden that things kind of clicked for him. And part of that was because he was doing it. He had the control in his hands. And I think for all of us, no matter how sophisticated we may think we are about the game, I think being kind of in that role, making some of the decisions that are going to have to be made, I think is really going to enrich the football experience and the football knowledge base just by having the opportunity to do that stuff and kind of manage it ourselves. So, I encourage people, don't feel daunted by it, embrace it as something that I think will help you kind of learn about the game and learn a different facet that you just, haven't necessarily paid attention to in the past, and have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I think it could be an absolute blast. Look, the frequently asked questions page has tons of information, is incredibly helpful. Going through the rules page and scoring page, I mean, there are, 20 plus tabs off to the left hand that just have tons of information on it. And it's incredible just reading through how detailed you were in putting all of this together. So greatly appreciate the commitment. And we look forward to some good seasons coming.
Great. Thanks for having me. Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it, Evan.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Football RPG Podcast. If you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to check out written content, head over to lastwordonsports.com.
Don't let the goblins get you.